another episode of Your Faith and Health Community. I'm your host, Pastor Jackie Jackson, and as always, on behalf of myself and our producer, Anita Alexander, I want to thank you very much for taking out time to spend with us today. Now, it's been a while since we've seen each other, or I guess I'm not seeing you, but it's been a while since you've seen me. And you know, though, nothing's changed, I'm going to ask you, since the last time, have you gotten enrolled in health insurance? Do you have health insurance? Whether Medicaid or marketplace insurance. Now, we know, because I've been saying this for 3.5 years, that if you have an income of $16,223 or less a year and single, that makes you eligible for Medicaid. If you are a family of 4 and your income, whether from one or combined, is $44,550 a year, that makes your entire family eligible for Medicaid. That covers medical, dental, vision, doctor's appointments, prescriptions, preventative care. It covers it all. Now, if you are working and you are above any of those guidelines, then that means that you would go to Marketplace. We are in May, so the Marketplace is closed unless you fit one of the life-changing events. You recently got married, divorced, had a baby, you recently moved into the state of Ohio, or you are coming home from a correctional institution, recently lost a job. So if those situations fit you, then you have 60 days from your life-changing event to be able to actually go to the Marketplace or Obamacare, or whichever phrase you need that's going to make you feel comfortable. You need to get insured. Because remember, all it takes is one serious medical bill to send you into bankruptcy. So if you don't want to get insurance for yourself, I got to mention this. If you're that 18 through 34, you know, the invincible, nothing's ever going to happen to me. Let's say you're out hooping basketball, you come down wrong and you break your ankle or your leg. That's going to be a medical bill. And when you go to emergency, they are going to hit your pocket. So if you don't do it for yourself, do it for your family, do it for the people that you care about. But at the end of the day, do it for you. Because you need health care. We all need to be healthy, faithful, and happy, right? So thank you again for tuning in. I just want to mention this because it hit me in my head while we were getting ready. This is actually 3 years and 6 months from our first show back in, I believe it was November of 2015. So we want to thank you for being with us all these years. As you can see, I'm just getting younger and younger, and that's what years do to us, right? But we have some very special guests. One individual that's here today is so special to me because her mother is a friend, but someone I haven't seen since 1974. And so we connected through the work that we do. And because of this young lady, I've been able to reconnect with her mom. And for me, that is like just a wonderful thing because her mother's house, which was her parents' house at the time, was a refuge for me. And they had no idea that it was when I was going through a difficult time. But we'll get to that. I want to welcome to the show Lavina Bryant and Rakia Abdul Matokalain. And they are with CSSJ, which is the Cincinnati
Crime Survivors for Safety and Justice.
Cincinnati Crime Survivors for Safety and Justice. Thank you, ladies, for being on the show.
You're welcome.
You have honored us by inviting us to this show so that we could speak to so many people as you do about how we need to help each other in these times and make our communities far more safer and have justice for everyone. So Jackie, I can't thank you enough for inviting us.
To God be the glory. And let me honor you the right way, so I will say Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. This also is our time of Ramadan, so how wonderful to be with you on this time.
Yes, it is, and so I apologize for what I did earlier. So tell us about your organization.
Well, Crime Survivors for Safety and Justice is an organization where we are made full, everybody in the organization are survivors. And basically what we do is make sure that we get legislation to shape their policies and we change policies around our survivors and make sure that we are getting compensated for different crime crimes and things that we've gone through and trauma that we've gone through. So basically that's what we do. And we also do prefer rehabilitation and and prevention over incarceration. So we basically would like to actually bring down the numbers of the incarceration population and bring that money back into the communities to make sure that these people are being compensated for the crimes and trauma, and making sure that they get, you know, the proper resources to continue to heal.
Okay, and you are the chapter coordinator
That's correct.
for CSSJ.
Yes, sir.
And Sister Rikia, you are the advocate coordinator.
Yes.
So tell us about this.
For me, it's getting out into the community to bring light into the community. While CSSJ, on one hand, is going towards legislation to try to improve the legislation, we're going out into the community to bring more light so that people can understand that there is a better way of life by us just being kinder to each other and reaching out and helping each other, finding out what's going on with each other that we can bring healing, because people need healing. When you go through a trauma, you have to be able to at least address that issue or what's bothering you inside. And when someone's there saying, I'm here just for you, or you help them to go out and do something positive, it helps that healing inside their soul. And that's is part of what's missing. We're not having light into our communities the way it used to be. And people are doing more vengeance. They're trying to do tit for tat. And that's not what it's about. It's how I got catapulted into this arena in the first place, because of my son.
So, and since we're there, let's talk about this sailor. Let's talk about your son.
Oh. His name, Suleiman Ahmed Abdul Mutakalim. We grew up in a different type of environment, and that environment had plenty of light. So we weren't accustomed to the kind of negative vibes that people got into. If you didn't succeed at something, that's okay, that's human beings. You try something else. So you're always looking at positive ways to go about doing something. And the most positive way is always a smile. Even to yourself, to your neighbors, just smile and look for things. And my son was the type of person who looked to help people all the time. He grew up with that Islamic understanding that we are all in this world together, and it's best to help each other, not hurt each other. He became a soldier or a military man. It was in our blood anyway. But part of him becoming military was to learn more about the world. And so the military brought that to him. He was the type of person, though, that said, I'm not carrying a gun. But he had to figure out how to do that without violating military laws. And he figured that out by the grace of the Creator, how to do that. And so he worked on a ship where they, when people were in need, they rescued them, basically. It was a rescue ship. So when he came out of the military, he still had that same atmosphere about himself. I want to help my community. When he was assaulted upon, he was just out there in that area of Cincinnati trying to help and bring light. It was, for me, devastating that a young man who didn't have a hard word to anyone, always tried to help anyone, that they felt impelled to just walk up behind him, not even speak to him, shot him in the nape of the neck. Then they robbed him, left him bleeding in the gutter. And they took his cell phone. He was still alive. They didn't have even the heart or the unction to call 911. This is a young man that all of the community in that area knew him. So when it happened to him, the whole community was absolutely devastated. People actually came forward and gave information about who were the people involved. And though they didn't arrest all 3 of the culprits, Jackie, they arrested the 2 boys. It was within 2 months they had him. They had the 2 boys. So it was the community that was shocked by it, not just my family. And the fact that they went into my son's life and found that he was not from that arena and that he didn't bring anything but good in his wake. They felt compelled as a community, the police officers, to join in and find out who did this. Well, the 2 youngest boys, the 14-year-old, the 16-year-old, they admitted to the crime. But the 25-year-old, which is the adult, is still out there, which bothers me, but it is something that in time, I'm sure, in time. His legacy and the way in which I raised him as a Muslim had to be reflected in how I move forward in my life dealing with this. And I know very well that he would not have wanted me to do anything but forgive the boys after we found out their life, how their life was. So we did. My family forgave them, and we offered to help them. And there's a video that many of the people have seen that has shown the forgiveness and the hugging the 14-year-old and offering forgiveness to the 16-year-old. The 14-year-old and the 16-year-old won't be out in this community again, one in 14 years and another in 20 years. But they're going to be in their season of manhood. And if we don't do better to help them not repeat this crime, we're going to see another mother crying. And I can't bear that, Jackie.
Well, let me ask you, was that here in Cincinnati that this took place?
Yes, it was in Cincinnati. They called the area the Commons, but I don't know it that well. I'm from the San Francisco area, and I'm just getting to know more about Cincinnati. And it's because of my son that I've learned the different areas from Seven Hills to Walnut Hills to Price Hill to downtown. And he was living in an area where it was 70% unemployment.
Okay.
And most of the people, if they were not of elderly age, they were young, poorly educated. I'm trying to say this as gingerly as possible. I don't want to offend anyone, but that area has a lot of people who are challenged, both mentally, mental challenge, and also physical challenge for money or supporting themselves. They're in the kind of education-wise, most of them haven't even finished high school.
Well, it's a lot of what we see within the inner city. And whether it's Cincinnati or Chicago or New York or, I don't know, Birmingham, when we look at the gun violence that's wrecking communities, you're seeing gun violence can happen anywhere. It could happen anywhere from Indian Hill to Price Hill. But unfortunately, what we see, basically because of disparagement in certain communities where jobs are low, or if they're working, the income is low, so a lot of times it's hard. You're not getting a living wage.
Right.
And then with mental illness, which we see every day with our job, with the community outreach advocates, a lot of people that we deal with, there is a level of mental illness. And so that's kind of what's going on, unfortunately, in our community. And if you really look at it, there's not a lot, or at least from my point of view, there's not a lot that's being done from the political side to correct it. It's almost like we'll let it go. The only solution that I think I'm seeing oftentimes from city governments around the country is, well, we'll just take the communities and then we'll flip those communities and we'll gendify them. You know?
Yes.
And so that's what we end up seeing. I want to ask, because I noticed on your bio it mentions that CSSJ is the flagship of Alliance for Safety and Justice. So what is Alliance for Safety and Justice?
Alliance and Safety and Justice are the main organization. Crime Survivors for Safety and Justice was created with a table of 13 people, and they were survivors. So they basically wanted to do something about their situations or the situations they've been through. So what they did was these 13 people said, hey, let's do this. And Alliance for Safety and Justice have people who are already in the actual office. And they said, well, you know, they came together and worked together with the survivors. And so they started trying to, with these 13 people, shape the policies around their experiences and the things that they weren't getting help with, and as far as with benefits, you know, there's issues with people getting compensated for the crimes that, you know, people have endured, and they might have lost people, or the trauma that people are going through and they're not getting help for. So that
And why are some of the reasons that they're not? Because I think one of the reasons, say for instance, a murder victim, whose family there may not have been insurance, the family's having problems covering the cost. One of the reasons that they can't get help is, say the individual that was murdered 25, 30 years ago had a felony. Yes. Since then has been a perfect, beautiful, wonderful model citizen, but because 30 years ago they had a brush with the law, they aren't eligible for funds when their family is suffering. And this individual wasn't murdered because he was out doing something wrong. It may have been, unfortunately, like your son, just going to the store, coming home, minding your business, and somebody decides, I'm going to take what you have, including your life. So I just wanted to throw that in there.
And that's absolutely correct. And not only that, but even the claimants, the people who they have left behind, if they have felonies, you know, even toxicology reports were playing a big part of why they were not getting compensation. So it's something that, you know, like when we do go up to legislation, we want to say, hey, this is the problem, but we do offer a solution with it. So
That's
like
correct.
like let's instead of doing this, let's do this and see how this works.
So you're also doing so you are advocacy, obviously, because you're the advocacy coordinator, but you're also a legislative group, right? You're doing legislative work. I mean, you're lobbying.
We do a bit of both, but the only way we get through legislation is if we make them listen to what it is that we've gone through, or what it is that we're going through, and see how we are dealing with these things, even without the help. If you can sit and tell somebody, this is my story, and this is how I'm getting through this, and I did not have this type of help, or this is not helping me, or this is what I'm going through because of this, they are listening, and they will listen, and it hits home. It hits a little bit harder to the heart sometimes. And so that is their way of getting the point across, like, we're out here, so what are you gonna do, basically.
And when we went to the Capitol, March 20th, 250 plus, like 250 people plus went to the legislation. They were all survivors, speaking their story, standing with each other, telling exactly what's happened. One of the things that I spoke on is that they didn't have trauma centers for people who need help in the community. And we have a trauma center in the community at Seven Hills Neighborhood House, but it needs help. It needs more funding. We need more of these. One of that CSSJ was able to do in California was that they only had 3 trauma centers. Within 3 years or 4 years, 12 trauma centers in the communities of that area came into being because survivors in California began to go to legislators and tell their story. And we train them. In other words, we teach people so that they can speak, because one of the things about people having trauma, what if you can't speak, or you got so much in, you don't know what to say first and how to say it, so we help them tell their story. We don't tell their story.
So you train them to frame their story.
so that they can, because we only get a few minutes with each one of these legislators. They only give us a few minutes, so you can't give the whole story. That may take hours. You give the important parts that make the difference of why you are here in the first place. Just yesterday or the day before, we had another shooting in a high school. Where? In Colorado. In an area close to Columbine type of situation, in school. So when people, I know I spoke on the community where my son was doing the help, but the problem is that this isn't limited to the poor areas. It's just that the poor areas got hit first.
Yeah, and probably I think one of the things that frustrates me is that high homicide rates have been in the inner city for a long time. It's much like drugs were in the inner city for a long time. It seems that until it starts touching outside of the inner city, until it starts touching suburbia, it doesn't get a lot of attention. But now there is a lot of attention. What I want to know, so you took 250 people to the State House in Columbus.
Yes.
Across Ohio.
From across Ohio, so
yes.
not from out of Cincinnati,
No,
but 250
all-
people from across Ohio. Okay, this is a two-part question. First, how long has CSSJ been active?
Since 2014.
So since 2014. So then my second part of the question is, from the work that you're doing, how effective would you say that it's been? And especially going up and talking at the Capitol, are you seeing changes coming into effect?
Yes, we are.
All right.
And
And you're smiling. You guys are high, so it must be good.
It is very good. It's
Because
excellent.
we're actually going back up there this Wednesday to support one of our bills that are being passed. I don't have quite a lot of information about it right now, but I got the call that, hey, we need you to come up to Columbus. We got this going on. They're getting ready to pass a bill. So I've been doing this, which I'll probably get into a little later, but since last year, October of last year. So for me, from October of last year to now, and my first trip up to Columbus in March, yeah, that was quick.
What is the bill? What is the bill?
Okay.
Well, we don't have all that.
Okay, we won't go. I got
we won't
you.
get
Okay.
into all of
We won't
that.
go into
Yeah.
that.
But I can very proudly say that Cincinnati stood up and was one of the biggest groups that went to Columbus to speak out. We had 60,
70.
Okay.
70.
between 60 and 70
Survivors?
All of them were survivors.
From Cincinnati.
From
Okay.
Cincinnati, standing up. And the fact that more people are coming to join CSSJ, because what they're finding is that there is results. One of the sayings is, what do you want? Change. When do you want it? Now.
But what makes CSSJ? Because there are a lot of survivor advocacy groups and
I
whatnot
agree.
out. What makes CSSJ different? And let me say this, because I'm not saying it in a competition, because we're all working
Yes.
toward the same goal, and that's important. But we don't always walk on the same road to get somewhere. So what is the difference in CSSJ?
Okay. So with that question, the difference with first, I've came across a lot of organizations, but the thing that I've seen different with Crime Survivors for Safety and Justice is that we have chapter meetings once a month, and we are actually giving people the platform and the space a safe space to actually tell their stories and speak about what they've gone through. And what we're trying to do is to make sure that we're pushing to make sure that they get the resources that they need from the trauma centers. We're sending them to trauma centers, but we're also using that pain that they have and turning it into power, and then using it as your voice. You can only do so much when you're hurting. You can only do so much when you're still stuck in that moment. One thing about Crime Survivors for Safety and Justice, that we believe that if we get you the resources, the healing can start immediately. A lot of other organizations do push for a lot of stuff, but they they talk about coping, where we talk about healing and continue healing and using that pain and turn it into power. And then we're also talking about how we want to lower the incarceration population and take that money and bring it back in to the communities to fund the trauma centers, make sure that the trauma centers are giving resources to these people who can be now sent somewhere else. You cannot heal if you're still thriving and grieving over what has happened to you. You know, and we're giving people space to do that. So if you was to come to a meeting, you would have that space to sit there and talk. We have a lot of females and quite a few males in the group. And we have a lot of people for the first time actually share their stories at these meetings. And as much as you talk about it, is like getting a fresh breath of air from what you've been feeling when you think about the situation. And then it grows into, well, what can I do to make sure this next person is not going through that, which is the same thing that's been for me when I came to work for SSJ.
Okay, so there's a lot of work. There's the legislative work.
Yes.
There is the
Community.
concern and love for the survivor, which becomes real important. And even understanding, I'm a survivor of gun violence. My family, my son, oldest son was shot. I've lost, well, not totally lost all, but between for the last 4.5 going on 5 years, 10 of the shootings, homicides in the city are from my family. So I understand from a number of different perspectives in terms of survivors. So there's the love for the survivor, there's the support for the survivor,
Yes.
but there is also, and I think becomes important, and I think sometimes is missing, is understanding
Yes.
what a survivor is and having that conversation with a survivor and being very careful on how we address, because oftentimes or sometimes people, they go, well, whatever happened, it happened 10 years ago, you should be past that, or you should be over that. And that is not a very good move. But we're running out of time, actually, so I want to
so
make sure, it goes by quick,
It
doesn't
does,
it?
it
But I
did.
want to make sure that this young man served his country.
Yes.
He, that is a big sacrifice. And in a time where the word hero to me is just thrown around, he walked across the street, he's a hero. No, he walked across the street. That's a beautiful thing. But we do have heroes. The young man at the school, was that in California, where the 18-year-old who was set to graduate chased down, attacked the shooter.
Right.
That is the definition of a hero.
It's Colorado.
Colorado, yes. And when I think about our men and women who don the uniform, who take that oath to say they will defend against domestic and foreign.
He did that.
And so I want to make sure that we take the last couple of minutes here, say his name again, tell us his rank, and let's actually, and everybody, let's make sure. Some of you may have ex-military or current military in your family. And it's a shame, and it really makes me mad when you think that our men and women go off to serve and risk their life only to come home and fall. But Rokia, I'm going to turn this last minute over to you.
His name, Suleiman Ahmed Abdul Mutakalim, and his rank was that of first, I forget what they say on the Navy, but for the Army is first lieutenant or something like that, but I don't know what they say with the Navy. And at the time he came out, he had decided to work in the community, because he said to me, how best to help anyone but to be in their communities with them. So this man brought the kind of heart that even today, we were at our meeting in Saturday with Cincinnati Works, and one of the people who knew him walked up to me and said, I remember your son. I love him.
And that's awesome. I want to thank you, since I can't thank him, for his dedication and service to our country.
He's with us, thank him. His spirit is here.
Listen, we thank you again for taking out time from your day to spend with us. I want to thank again Lavina Bryant and Rokia Abdul Mutakalim.
Rokia Zahra Abdul Mutakalim.
And we want to thank you. Listen, stay faithful, stay healthy.